Andy, I had a nickname like in the army when I used to travel a lot, and it was Pigpen. And the reason it was because Pigpen, that Charlie Brown character had the
Yeah.
cloud of shit that always just came around with him. That was always what happened with me. For whatever reason, it would be the one time that a rare weather event happened in a certain connecting city, and we'd barely make the connection or get delayed. And so that was the army, but then post army, the last three main trips that I've taken. Now I've taken a couple trips here and there, but like the three biggest ones, Costa Rica in 2021, 2022, into Seattle last year, and then Mexico this year have all been like crazy. So Costa Rica, I got COVID and was quarantined for
Yep.
3 week,
Yep.
three extra weeks. I say I left in 2021. We were supposed to come back on New Year's Eve on 2021, and I got back in 2022. Last year in Seattle, I got COVID again. They wanted us to stay and all that other stuff. I was like, nah, this is ridiculous. And then this year, go to Mexico, and they'd been sunny skies and actually it was like drought conditions for so long. Um, and now we got hit with the tropical storm that is now coming through the United States. So rained on us a lot of it, but still had a great time on vacation, Andy. So it's good to be back here with you today.
You too. You were definitely missed this week, as I lost control of the schedule entirely while you were gone. But I'm glad you got a chance to get away. I'm glad you brought your hellstorm of chaos around you, as you traveled. So that's good, and kept your pig pen reputation alive. But I'm glad you made it back safely. How was the trip? Was it a great experience?
Yeah, it was fun. We saw a lot. Like we don't. So here's the one thing. I'm out on like resort type of things. Like I'm not a big all like you go to the resort and they have all these things on the resort area and you don't really have to leave it. We don't like to do any of that kind of stuff. One, the food wasn't that great, and so you don't necessarily want to stay there when the food is not great. But we like to go around and see some of the sites, some of
Yeah.
like the history of those places. I've never been to Mexico. Like I've been to like border towns like Nogales when I was at Fort Huachuca, and but that's not, I don't want to say that's really Mexico. And so we went to see some of the great history there, Chichen Itza. I probably pronounced that wrong. And then a lot of the local stuff. We went to an awesome park where they had a great uh, like celebration at the end, like a big show at the end that really celebrated Mexico's history, which was really cool because you saw a lot of the like the early stages of how they played sports with the I can't remember the name of the sport, but you have the hoops on the side of the buildings, and then they have to use everything but their hands and feet to get the ball in the hoop. It was just really cool. So we really enjoyed it. But I'm kind of out on resorts. I don't think I'd ever want to go back to a like one of those all-inclusive resorts. I know people go to the Bahamas, but they don't ever actually see the rest of the island, which is in poverty and all that stuff. They just go to the resort area. I think
Yeah.
Mexico's got a great history and traditions and such, and it's a shame that we don't see more of it, I guess, Andy. So I really was impressed with Mexico. So
Yeah, well, I'm glad you got to do it. I think it's true. I think Mexico. I mean, I think there are parts of the country where there's concerns about violence and whatnot, which turns it off for people. But I mean, it is our southern neighbor. It's a big country. It's a country rich with history and rich history of people. And it's great that you got to go down there and explore it and check it out and venture out a little bit. So I'm glad you went and enjoyed Mexico's hospitality and made it back safely today for the special episode today.
yeah, this is a very special episode, 100th episode, Andy. This is I can't we started this in September. We've
Yeah.
been talking about it for much longer. We have our own separate podcast that we do separate, for business related purposes, but for like you and I doing this, it's
Yeah.
been an awesome 100 episodes, Andy, to be able to do this even when you do leave me from time to time. So
Well, things were nutty while you were gone. Wendy's episode, I completely lost control of the schedule, ran excessively long and was very long-winded. It was tough, Dave. It was tough trying to hold things down in your absence. So I'm glad you're back as we end this week and as we go into next week. So let's get started wherever you're taking us today. Welcome back, and I know you're fresh off the plane and still travel wearied. And hey, take us where you're going to take us.
All right, Andy. Well, let's start with the clock here. And Andy, one of the topics that we routinely talk about is mis, dis, and malinformation, just conspiracy theories type of things. I saw this and I just had to send it to you. I know you talked a little bit about misinformation while I was out, but Kate Middleton, the
Yeah.
Princess of Wales. She made a lot of news at the end of last year. Where is Kate? Where is Kate? Came out finally that she had cancer and she's doing treatment, by herself. There's been a lot of other stories about whether, Prince William was cheating on her, and she's gone into like, isolation because of it. All this other stuff. If you cheat on Kate Middleton, I'm sorry, I got no love for you. But she's one of the most beautiful women on the planet. But Andy, she came out last week for one of the royal ceremonies. I'm not going to pretend to tell you which one that was, but and it was. I thought she looked great. I mean, she looked thinner, which I think would be understandable if you're going through treatment and some of the other stuff. If you just had surgery, so if you have that a lot of that going on, that's one thing. But I thought she looked great. And I didn't think anything else of it, Andy. I did not think 1 minute more about Kate Middleton other than she looked like Kate Middleton. Well, I saw a posting yesterday. Apparently, it was not cancer, Andy, or the conspiracies are it's not cancer. It's actually she had a facelift, Andy,
Right.
and that's where we're at on the socials, Andy, with Kate Middleton. I forwarded it to you. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd seen things like this. I've seen people, all sorts of wild theories about what's really going on with the Royals. There's a lot of talk about, she couldn't possibly have cancer because her hair didn't fall out as she's getting treatment. Just uninformed, like nonsensical speculation, and on the chemo end, I mean, I could say, and a lot of people said this, like, your hair doesn't necessarily fall out when you get chemo. It really depends on what exactly you're getting and how you're getting it. Not everybody has that, that challenge. My hair was already short before I started my chemo, as you know, Dave. It didn't affect anything on my head. That's the case for a lot of people. But the way that people love to just speculate on things they don't know, say things with confidence that they know nothing about, given we do that from time to time on the show. But it's really ridiculous. And so, I personally, I don't care what's happening with Kate Middleton. I wish her luck with her treatment. I'm glad she's well enough to go out, and I know it's not easy every time. But yeah, it's incredible how much people follow the Royals, how much people care about the Royals, how much people speculate about the Royals, and then how much just straight up BS there is on the mess that is X and elsewhere. And elsewhere, it's not limited just to the X platform, but there's a lot of nonsense there for sure.
Yeah, I find it like just crazy. Like that's when you have so many people speculating
Yeah.
on these platforms, and again, without any realm of and look, I get it. We should be like challenging. We don't like these people, meaning politicians and royal families. They've given us plenty of reasons to question what's going on. But I mean, I think are we going to a bit too far when we start dissecting every little part of it. And I guess like the tools are so great now that we can zoom in on things and do compares that we didn't used to be able to have. They're so readily available to people, but is this really like, is this worth our time? Like, don't you have things better to do than whether, like, who cares at the end of the day, right? Whether she had, like, obviously, if she's selling herself as having cancer when she really did a facelift. Obviously, that's a little bit of a low blow. But do you think people actually do that kind of stuff, Andy? That's where I'm at. Is like, at what point do you just say this is bordering on like idiocy?
Well, if it's on the X platform, it's pretty routinely, to be honest with you. But yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I got nothing left to add to that, Dave. I will say though, while I was looking at that, post that you shared on X, I did see that today happens to be Joyce DeWitt's 75th birthday. Dave, if I say the name Joyce DeWitt, do you know who I'm talking about?
I actually I was just wondering who the hell that is,
It
Andy.
is it is it is Janet from Three's Company, one of the greatest shows of
That's
our growing
right.
up lifetimes. Joyce DeWitt played the lovable roommate, the dark-haired roommate Janet, as various blondes rotated in. So, starting with Suzanne Summers and then going on to two other replacements over the years. But Janet was steady and lovable alongside John Ritter, who played one of TV's greatest characters, Jack Tripper. So happy birthday, Joyce DeWitt. Three's Company is 47 years old right now, Dave, which is unbelievable. I love that show. So not to completely pivot in the middle of the discussion here, but
Well,
man, I love that
now
show.
that you have, we have to ask the question: were you Janet or Chrissy? I mean, who?
There's no competition, Dave. They're both lovable, wonderful characters who filled many moments of my young life growing up. I can't pick one or the other or the replacements, right? There was Cindy and Terry. They were all great. I loved that show. I loved, I think, every character that was ever on that show. I loved the Regal Beagle. I loved it all. I loved it all.
Okay,
That
so here, okay, that's good. That sounds good. Were you a Mr. Roper or Furley person? I mean, because
Again, both just absolutely kind of the Ropers, the way that Mr. Roper would turn and look in the camera and give you that wry smile after saying something about his crazy wife, and then Mr. Furley was just, I mean, Don Knotts was incredible, right? I
yeah.
mean, I love that guy. I mean, that show was great.
So, Andy, this is where we were at in television back then. It's like the Ropers got a spin-off show.
Yeah,
Like we don't get spin-off shows anymore. Like I think the last one I can think of is like the last real one, I guess, that successful one was Frasier, which of all the Cheers personalities,
yeah,
nobody thought Frasier was going to be anything, and it wound up being a very successful show
yeah.
over the years. And I think they even did like a little bit of a reboot last year or two or something on one of the streamers. But all good stuff there. Okay, Andy, good distraction, good way to get us off the miss this
There you
malinformation.
go. Here to help. Here to help. Happy birthday, Joyce DeWitt.
There we go, Joyce DeWitt. I was partial to Chrissy, so
Fair.
I'll just say that. Okay, Andy, I'm going to stop the timer. Going to reset us while we're on the topic of entertainment. Andy, super exciting news. I mean, at least for me, I know for me, one of my great joys as a dad is like introducing my kids to things that I love, and then to see them love it as well, right? You
Yeah.
know, sometimes you do that with sports. Sometimes you do that with the shows you like and all this other stuff. Andy, a classic movie that I distinctly recall going to the movies for in the 80s was Spaceballs, the movie.
Yes.
It was great. Rick Moranis was genius. Mel Brooks was genius. This is a early, John Candy, Bill Pullman was in it, and then he even had it was just a great movie. But it was just a one and done, as most of Mel Brooks movies are. But it lives on because you can watch this movie today and just laugh as hard as you would then. It's not quite the parody movies that you have with some of the ones that I talked about a couple of weeks ago, but it's like stand up on its own as a great classic movie, poking fun, but not necessarily a straight parody. Andy, they're coming out with a Spaceballs sequel. Josh Gad, Do You Want to Build a Snowman? Most famously from I view him mostly as from Frozen. What do you think when you saw Spaceballs, the sequel coming out? That's exciting for me.
I mean, you've always been a fan. You've always talked about the show, and I think I said this before. I think I've seen parts of Spaceballs many times over the years. I don't think I've ever sat and watched the whole movie.
Oh
You know,
my God.
but I know it. I know some of the lines from it. I know the characters. It was huge, and I was very surprised to see that it was getting rebooted now. Like how many years later? I think it's fun. I think it's a fun idea. I think it'll be fun to bring that kind of silliness. I don't think there are a lot of really good spoofs, anymore either.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah.
used to see a lot more. I mean, from ridiculous things like Weird Al Yankovic, right, and Eat It and all of his crazy wacky movies and or videos and songs, to actual like spoof movies. It's just I think you've talked about this before. I think the studios just everything's got to be so big and so deliberate and so thought out. That's part of why we don't have the spin-offs anymore. I think everything's just a 75 part endless Star Wars saga or whatever it is. They don't take chances like they used to. I mean, Spaceballs was a crazy movie to make, and a sequel is a crazy movie to make. I think it's fun that they're doing it. I'd like to check it out.
Yeah, I distinctly remember coming back from the theater with watching the Spaceballs, and I was like, that was the stupidest, like when I that was the stupidest movie I've ever seen. I hated it. It was awful. And then I started recounting the lines and the scenes, and I was like, oh my God, I love this movie. This is a great movie, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I have no idea what the details on this are very limited. I have no idea what it would possibly entail. Josh Gad, what would he play the barf character that John Candy did? I mean, that might be a role that he did. Bill Pullman obviously is much old. All like it's so long ago. Like I don't think you can do a true sequel. So how does that really work? But I find this interesting. Rick Moranis, Andy, he did
Yeah.
some great movies, great movies, great comedy. Some
He
people
was huge
remember
for a while. I mean, he was huge.
he was huge.
Yeah,
And then he left. Like he left completely. I always found his story fascinating because his wife passed away and he had to raise his kids. And so he left Hollywood. Or he
yeah,
left doing entertainment and he took care of his kids. So it would be great, Andy, I think, if somehow they were to work Rick Moranis back into this show because I think it's just great. And Mel Brooks, I mean, I know he's
yeah,
really old at this point, but you just don't lose that level. I think we've lost a level of comedy where we had Airplane and all those great, you had the Naked Gun movies.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
even the original of those movies were so good that I just we it's hard to find those now. And again, unless it's going to make 200 million at the box office, which
Exactly.
comedies don't, it's going to be hard to do. I think this is going to streaming. I think this is going to Amazon, which maybe that's why Amazon and Netflix are going to be beating out these major studios soon. I don't know, Andy, but I'm excited for it for sure.
Yeah, I think they'll take chances and do fun, silly movies without, without spending, billions of dollars, right, in production, and have fun with it and make some money and provide some entertainment. Like Amazon's Rickety Snickety. We were talking about that with John
Yeah.
Cena. It was a silly movie. It wasn't a massive big budget movie. It was just fun entertainment, goofy, and it was likable. And I think we don't see those types of movies go to the theater anymore because they're not going to be, huge blockbusters. Not that, new movies are like Garfield, but I think it's a fun way to get those movies out in front of people in a way that's good to consume. But Dave, let me again pivot back if I could. Speaking of misinformation on X, and let me correct the pivot from our previous segment. It is not Joyce DeWitt's birthday. That was misinformation on,
Oh,
on X. Her birthday was back in April. She was just trending for no real reason, and then people got confused by the fact that she was 75, as I just did. So to go back to our previous segment
this
and
is
to
how
point out
easy
how
it
easy it
is.
is to get misinformation. It's so
Yeah.
easy, Dave. Here we were celebrating her birthday. She turned 75 back in April of this year. So nonetheless, happy birthday for 75 in 2 months and a little bit of change maybe, Joyce. But we still love Three's company and we're still grateful for you to be around having fun. So correcting some of our own misinformation, Dave.
There you go, Andy. I'm glad we did it. Our loyal listeners are better for it now. Andy, you talked about Planet of the Apes, and you talked about seeing that show earlier this week. I last weekend I saw Inside Out 2, and we talked about that one previously. It dominated the box office last weekend. I thoroughly enjoyed that movie. My daughter and I went. We had a great time. And guess what, Andy? It was 90 minutes. That's like
Yeah,
or an hour and 45 minutes. Like under 2 hours, that hit me with that all day long. Let's just get to the point of telling good stories in a short amount. I don't need a 3.5 hour movie. I
yeah,
just don't, Andy.
yeah.
So
Well,
I
well, guys, yeah, that's my wife is a therapist. She specializes in something called IFS therapy, and an IFS therapist helped inform that movie. And all those little characters represent parts, which is something we talk about a lot in my household. So we're very excited to see that as well. My wife is very geeked up in her professional life to go see that. So I'm glad you saw it. Looking forward to checking it out. And just for anybody that's listening that maybe is thinking about it, if you're thinking about therapy, find an IFS therapist. It's strange and really helpful. So just throwing that out there, Dave, for all the mental health points we need to make. IFS therapy is really great. Ties into Inside Out too. Enjoy both.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will be able to relate to Inside Out too. I definitely recommend going to see it. We are over though, Andy, so we need to go to our last segment
Yes.
here, Andy. So I'm going to start the clock here. Andy, speaking of like, I'm going to try to tie all this stuff in, right? There's a great scene in Airplane, where some, the flight attendants asking people what they want and all this stuff, and there are two African American individuals, and they are speaking Jive, Andy, and it's a great scene where the stewardess says, "I'm sorry, I don't speak Jive," and then Mrs. Beaver, Mrs. Cleaver from Leave It to Beaver
Yeah,
stands
yeah,
up, and everyone loves this little old lady. And she's like, "I'm sorry, I speak Jive." And she translates, and it's one of the greatest scenes ever, because Jive was a thing back in the late 70s, early 80s, as was breakdancing.
yeah. Oh,
Breaking One and
yeah.
Two, if you ever saw that movies, I did.
Electric Boogaloo, Electric
El-
Boogaloo. Yeah,
Electric Breaking Two, Electric Boogaloo. That's exactly right, Andy.
classics.
Those were green light back in the day, our day. And so Andy, but a new type of I don't want to call it, every generation has their slang, right, Andy? Well, now the Gen Xers or Gen Zers, is that what they are? Gen Zers? They've got all
Gen Z, and even Gen Alpha, Dave. Even Gen Alpha.
the Gen Alpha. So they've got their slang here, Andy. And it's kind of funny. There's been some posts lately. There's a lot of TikTok posts about it, or Reels posts about translating what things like Sigma, Riz, Ohio, or things like that mean. Do it. I know some of it. I hear a lot of it because obviously I've got some kids who are talking about being mid or something like that.
Yeah.
How are you on your Gen Y, Gen Alpha, Gen Z's slang, Andy? How are you there?
So I do, I would say relatively well because I have two, young men who are currently at home. As one of my sons graduated, one's between semesters here. So I hear all this chaos. And as I saw this article, I was like, this sounds like our dinner table conversation with my kids sort of like going down their own conversation of slang. My wife and I looking at each other like, what the hell are they saying? And then them trying to translate for about 5 seconds, and they're like, just don't worry about it, mom and dad. And so it was pretty funny. I don't think all the details in the article are exactly right. I think they're pretty close to right, but I think my boys would object to some of the use of terms. Ohio being one of them, the way it's used in the article, and others. I thought it was funny though. I thought it was funny because people freak out about slang. People love to talk about youth brain rot right now with our young kids. There's always slang. There's always goofy language. That's part of the fun. This can be a whole conversation we're not going to have today on terms like cultural appropriation, which I struggle with. To be honest, I think language is so live and fluid and silly, and like it's always evolving. And I think the fact that kids can sort of take pop culture and turn it into local dialect, so to speak, and that old people like us, Dave, never understand it or fully appreciate it, and we become that grumpy old man on the lawn that's like, speak English, you little, like that's been the case always, right? With every generation, we cry about the language, we cry about the fashion, we cry about the music, we cry about whatever, like whatever they're into. Today it's phones, rock and roll music, rap music, whatever it is. Like I think it's funny, and so it's funny to see, you know, boomers and Gen Xers and even millennials now, struggling to keep up with young kids and their language. I think those things take off and move much faster, right? Because of our connectivity with phones and technology. So like that slang can go everywhere really fast, and everyone's talking. And here we are saying, what the hell is skibbity? And I think it's funny to hear it.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree, Andy. I mean, look, you go watch Back to the Future, and in the '80s, where they jump back to the '50s, and how like the music and all the clothing and styles are all different. Every generation has it, but also, Andy, every generation has complaints about their younger cohorts as well, in terms of even going into the workplace, Andy, as well. And so there's another article that you shared. This was a poll that was for Newsweek that highlighted that U.S. adults find their Gen Z colleagues tough to work with.
Yeah.
40% of our, look, Gen Z, by the way, that's from 97 to 2012. It's going to be the largest part of the workforce by the end of 2035. So in about 10 years, Andy, they're going to be dominating the workforce, where I'm sure, Andy, they'll be complaining about their Gen Alpha or Gen Bravo or whatever cohorts there. But just some real quick statistic, Andy. 40% of respondents identified Gen Z as the most difficult to work with, including Gen Z themselves. But the generation hit back, explained that young people are prioritizing work-life balance rather than giving all in the workplace. This is always how it's going to be, Andy, don't you think? I mean, this look, and I'm going to tell you, like, for every Gen Zer that I work with, there's good ones and bad ones, just like there are boomers. There are good
Yeah,
ones and bad ones,
yeah,
and even Generation X, good ones and bad ones. I have not look. I do believe that prioritizing work-life balance is something that we, as a cult, like Gen Boomers and Gen Xers, are saying we should be doing. We're
yeah.
building that in, and then we get upset when the Gen Zers take advantage of it. I think that's bullshit. But Andy, I just wanted to call out. Any thoughts on that? Any of your experiences?
Well, no, I mean, I've got no complaints about young workers. I think, again, there's always changes in the way we approach things and do things, and some of that we grow out of, and some of that we keep, and there's usually, good changes over time. What my takeaway from the article, Dave, is you look at the survey, is that everybody loves Gen X, and I think that's really the important point. Gen X was the most liked, generation to work with because we're freaking awesome. So, the takeaway here is that, old people always are frustrated with young people, and everybody loves Gen X, as everybody should. America's greatest generation, probably applicable worldwide. So, glad to see that verified in this survey. But Dave,
Yeah,
real quick, as we wrap this up, again, I'm going to put one more time just for fun because you brought up Breakin' 2 and Breakin'. Do you remember The Last Dragon?
The Last Dragon. No,
Oh
I don't
man,
think
when we
so.
start going down these early mid '80s crazy movies, I always think about that one. It was Leroy Jackson, electric, martial arts. It was like this goofy martial arts comedy, at a time when martial arts movies were pretty successful and popular. Great capture of like early '80s fun in all of those. Break In 2. I think Beat Street was one of them, but The
Eat
Last
Street. Oh
Dragon.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Great stuff.
Okay, Andy, that's good. We went a little bit over, but you've taken us on a couple tangents today, Andy, and I think we're better off for it. It's better when there's two of us together because we can do those things. Otherwise, we just go rambling on ourselves, and I don't think anybody likes to hear that. But
Wednesday
um,
was a ramble, Dave. Wednesday was. I apologize to our listeners as I completely lost control.
well, no need to apologize, Andy. We've got a loyal group of listeners. They like to hear you talk, so that's always good. All right, Andy, any plans for the weekend?
Probably, but I've got to make it through today first, and I can't even think
Yeah.
about tomorrow yet. So I've got a Friday ahead of me, Dave. There's just so much to do yet. So I'm glad we can get up in these early hours. As Dave, we are officially in the season of summer now. So
We
grateful
are.
to kick off summer here with you. Grateful that you made it back from your journey safely and healthy, pig pen and all, and grateful, Dave, to celebrate 100 episodes with you. So exciting milestone. So lot to celebrate this weekend among whatever else I'm doing. Anything on your deck?
Not much. Speaking of the summer solstice, it is a full moon out, like a glorious full moon out is great. So no, Andy, I had nothing exciting. I got to do some yard work, always exciting, right? And
Always.
then just clean up and get back into the swing of things after being gone for a couple of days. So, Andy, great to be back on the pod with you. Great to see you. With that, I'll actually catch up with you on Monday then, Andy.